So the main things that we're asking about in the survey, we're trying to identify what are the leadership barriers that women in Northwestern Minnesota are facing. What are the supports that they have found in their life? And includes asking things like, who have been your role models in your life? Where do you go for support or professional development, things like that. And then we also ask about their civic participation because we know, a lot of the research focuses on women in corporate leadership, and that's not directly applicable to women in rural areas. So a lot of women in rural areas, they kind of flex their leadership muscles in community organizations. And in small towns, in rural areas, we're not talking about huge corporations that have lots of levels and hierarchy. And so what does leadership look like for women in those areas? What are the spaces where women are able to practice those leadership skills that then can help springboard them into elected office or other positions where there's more authority and more decision-making power? So we wanted to know, what organizations are you in? How have you sort of played leadership roles in those organizations? And really trying to get women to think broadly about all of the ways that they're exhibiting leadership in their lives, which they may not think about as leadership necessarily. So women in Minnesota, just like women nationally, earn on average significantly less than men. Over the course of their lifetime, it equates to about $400,000 less in earnings. Because of that, lesbian households have the lowest average household income. Women are disproportionately working in lower paid, poor benefit service positions. There are few women who work in STEM and construction, which are higher paid positions. Ironically, the more education that women have, the wider the gap is between men and women. So you would think that it would go the other way, but unfortunately it does not. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at this table, it shows the percent of men's earnings, and women actually do better in rural areas than in urban areas. So women, but still depressingly, only earn 77% of what a man earns in greater Minnesota. And as you can see, the overall income levels are lower. So there is a greater gender wage gap for people of color. So it's twice as big for Hmong, Native American, and Latina women, almost as much for African American women, and 2.5 times greater for Somali women. So that's significant, especially in our rural Minnesota communities that have a larger Somali and East African population. And many Minnesota mothers are primary breadwinners. So this is especially important when we look at these different cultural groups. And the wage gap, the wealth gap, really is attributable to all of these things: the education gap, the income gap, the inheritance gap, and the homeownership gap. So there's a lot of things that we think about when they go into that sort of disparity for women.
That's a great graphic. I haven't seen it explained in that way before.
I know, I hadn't either. But I really think it does summarize, like, these are all of the things we sort of have to take into consideration.
Cool, thanks.
So in terms of professional leadership, this is nationally now, not Minnesota specific, but on a national level, white men, 52% of entry-level positions in the United States, 52% of them are white men. But those 77% of the kind of highest corporate officer positions are men, versus for white women, it's significantly lower. And for women of color, it's even less. And so, this shows you kind of that disparity in professional leadership. And in Minnesota's companies, of the 7 top publicly held companies in Minnesota, only 9% are headed by a woman. 30% have no women executives at all. And 20 women only hold 20% of the corporate board of director seats. And this is something that, Teresa has talked about a lot, is just this is an opportunity for women to move into some of those board seats.
Well, and Teresa and I studied leadership, 25 years ago, and I'm shocked that the numbers haven't changed that much. I mean, it's kind of depressing, actually, but that's why we're doing what we're doing, right?
So as we know, women have a lot more caretaking responsibilities. In Minnesota, women spend about 1.75 hours more per day, almost 2 hours more per day than fathers. And that includes primary care. It includes secondary care. So that's all of the things that you're doing for your children, even when they're not at your house or with you at work, and housework. And we know Minnesota has super expensive infant care costs. We're the 5th least affordable in the United States. And the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recommends that that families only spend 7% of their income on childcare, but only 6% of 2-parent families meet this. So in Minnesota, as far as state political offices go, about 24% of our state senators are women. About 36% of our representatives are women. And also a minority of women are court justices. And this graph shows you that women of color and Native American women are even more underrepresented than white women. In county politics, as far as state commissioner races go, 18.4% of all candidates were women. And 15.8% of all winners were women, which is just abysmal. I mean, if you think about the opportunities for women to really make an impact on a local level, there's a lot of room for opportunity there. And women comprise only 17% of all county board chairs. When it comes to the city level, only 17% of Minnesota cities have female mayors, and only 27% of school superintendents are women. So if we look at, the educational system, which is really dominated by women teachers, and even in the education world, there is a huge disparity between male and female leadership. And I thought this was another interesting statistic, that 49% of Minnesota women volunteered within the past year compared to 38% of men. So we know women are civically engaged and they are active and they are volunteering. And so one of the challenges I think for the 100 and 100 project is to figure out, how do you leverage those volunteer opportunities into leadership skills that they can then translate into more opportunities. So why do we care about having women in politics? There is research that shows that women introduce more legislation related to women's rights, children, and family. Women of color and Native American women bring unique community voices and perspectives and better represent the issues of those communities. They bring back more federal money to their constituents. So they, on average, Congresswomen secure about 9% more federal money for their district. And they work harder to affect change. So they sponsor and co-sponsor more bills.
I could name for you, on one hand, the women on those watershed district boards in the Northwest region. And I don't think it would take, I might need to go to my second hand if I wanted to name the women who are on those county boards. And those two organizations make a lot of decisions about everything that happens on the landscape across, this water management is sort of it's a really big deal in the Red River Valley. Who wins and who loses in these decisions. And county boards make a lot of decisions about, sort of roads and infrastructure might be something that you commonly identify with counties, but a whole lot of human care. And maybe in COVID era, the public health leaders see their profile is raised, and we see the work that women are doing to keep us safe. And so I'm looking for, I think this project has just great opportunity. And I think I'm especially aware now of the disparity between the white men and the women of color. That is just so sickening, really, right? That is just so sickening. And so we have a lot of work to do within ourselves, within our communities, within all these structures to change the way we see one another.
I found a study that looked at how the leadership traits that women have are like perfectly suited for what rural communities need right now, because rural communities are becoming more diverse. And so what they really need are people who are open-minded, which women tend to be more open-minded, and more collaborative. And so they're willing to sort of bring different stakeholders into the conversation. And so I think it's really important that we not exclude women who maybe haven't had those traditional leadership roles,